Welcome to this explainer on the architect of the self. Human beings don't just exist through a series of random events. We actually live to the very specific meanings we assign to those events. Today, we're going to take a really deep dive into how we subconsciously weave all our fragmented, chaotic experiences into one coherent life story. We're literally looking at the architecture of your own mind.
So let's kick things off with a pretty profound question, one that really launches this whole introspective journey. Are you simply the story you've constructed? Or are you the storyteller? It sounds like a subtle distinction, I know, but as we're about to uncover, how you answer this question literally dictates the amount of freedom you have in your everyday life.
To really understand how we build ourselves, we first need to define what psychologists and philosophers call narrative identity. Think of it as your mind's brilliant way of creating coherence out of a completely fragmented sequence of life experiences. Life happens to all of us, right? Moment by moment. But your mind grabs those isolated moments, strings them together into a narrative, and experiences them as my life. It's the ultimate bridge between where you've been, where you are right now, and where you're headed.
Okay, part one, the mechanics of time. Let's explore how this narrative builds across the timeline of our lives, transforming just raw time into personal architecture.
Because think about it, in our minds, we don't treat the past like some perfectly objective video archive. No way. We use selective memory. We cherry-pick specific experiences that maybe wounded us, or totally inspired us, or changed our trajectory. Then, we anchor ourselves in the present, which basically acts as this narrative crossroads. It's the exact intersection where our remembered past meets our anticipated future. And finally, we aim at an imagined future. Why does this matter to you? Well, without a future horizon, life just feels like a repetitive loop. But with it, suddenly ordinary, mundane actions gain massive purpose. Getting an education isn't just a chore, it becomes preparation. Aging isn't just a decline, it becomes a stage of profound transformation.
All right, moving into part two, the danger, meaning versus prison. While building this timeline is absolutely crucial for living a meaningful life, we've got to confront some hidden dangers in our own storytelling. Because honestly, the stories we tell ourselves can either completely save us or totally trap us.
It's actually wild how narrative identity acts like a psychological alchemist. It takes raw, sometimes incredibly painful events and flips them into deep significance and purpose. Events on their own don't just automatically create a meaningful life. That meaning only emerges when we actively link them together. So, a failure is transformed into a lesson, a painful loss deepens into profound compassion, a really tough struggle becomes the literal source of your strength. That is the incredible, positive power of the stories we tell.
But, and this is a huge but, there's a really serious danger here. When we get a little too attached to fixed labels, telling ourselves we are the successful person, the victim, the failure, or heck, even the spiritual person, the narrative that once helped us make sense of life suddenly turns into a rigid prison. Because once your story becomes locked in, any new experience you have gets either ignored or totally distorted just so it fits that existing identity. You essentially become trapped playing a character of your own making.
Which brings us to part three, rewriting your narrative. To break out of this prison, we desperately need a paradigm shift. We have to wake up to the fact that true personal growth actually requires us to actively edit and revise our life story. The absolute crucial psychological pivot here is moving away from just blindly accepting an identity and starting to actively question how it was built in the first place. Think about it. The immature self makes this super definitive, closed-off statement, well, this is just who I am. It leaves zero room for growth. But the reflective self? It asks an open, deeply curious question. Why do I understand myself this way? That one simple shift in framing is exactly what unlocks your ability to change.
And by stepping through these mental reframes, we actively transform our basic biography into true human development. Take step one, this happened to me. Okay, that's a completely passive state. Step two moves to, this shaped me. That's better, it acknowledges the impact, but it still leaves you as just a result of an event. But step three, what can I learn and become through it? Wow, that is where the magic actually happens. Making the past material for understanding, rather than some predetermined destiny, is exactly how you take the pen back and start writing your own life.
So part four, becoming the storyteller. Let's slow down for a second and step into the ultimate philosophical deep end of this explainer to really see how we reach complete maturity.
If you actually have the capacity to observe your memories, to question your interpretations, and to genuinely notice the identities you've constructed, you kind of have to ask yourself a totally mind-bending question. Who is the one doing the observing? The profound realization here is that the very second you can observe your story, you're no longer completely identical to it. You are something more.
It's like our psychological evolution climbs this invisible staircase. We start at the bottom with to have, where we fiercely identify with our status, our roles, and what we've achieved. Then we step up to know, where we start examining the story itself, asking, which parts were freely chosen and which were just handed to me. And finally, we reach to be. At this top level, we hold our narrative so lightly. The story is still there, sure, but we realize we are vastly deeper than the constructs we've spent our lives building.
Now, as we unpack those inherited parts of our story, we've got to be real about something. Our scripts are absolutely not written in a vacuum. The early drafts of our identities are largely handed over to us by major societal frameworks. We're talking family, culture, language, religion, education, and the specific historical circumstances we just happen to be born into. We didn't choose a single one of those starting parameters.
Look, we obviously can't choose everything that happens to us. You can't pick your birthplace or your childhood, but, and this is absolutely crucial, our ultimate freedom lies in increasingly choosing what those experiences actually mean. A mature individual doesn't just sit around asking, what happened to me? They ask, what am I making of my life right now? That active daily participation, that is the very definition of freedom.
The entire arc of human development really culminates in this one incredibly powerful shift. It's the move from being a passive character who's unconsciously governed by a script to becoming the totally conscious author of your own existence. Now, do you need a story to understand your life? Absolutely. But you also need the awareness to see beyond that story so it doesn't end up confining you.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to think about the labels you've placed on yourself over the years. Are they actually serving you, or have they become a prison? Your identity shouldn't be some fixed, rigid answer. I'm going to leave you with this open inquiry to reflect on as you turn the page to write your next chapter. If you are not just the story you tell about yourself, what does it truly mean to be?